I can already tell this video is definitely going to be pretty unorthodox just from the script alone. Unlike any of my other videos, I want to start this one off by posing a few questions to anyone watching. Do you personally have any siblings? And if so, do you care about your siblings? And regardless of how you answered, what would you do if one of them disappeared without a trace? Now, I'm gonna have to get this out of the way eventually, so I might as well rip the band-aid off and do it now. This video isn't technically complete. Sure, you're watching the current video at whatever length it is, but it is a smaller piece of something bigger. A two-part series, actually. The video you are currently watching will be dedicated to compiling all information we have on Des currently and making basic interpretations of it, especially to foreshadow and set up what the second video will be, a theory of mine to predict the life, tragedy, fate, and current existence of December Holiday. If I'm gonna be honest, some parts of my theory are pretty out there, and I wouldn't be surprised if it can be ripped into easily and debunked, but what harm is there in giving my own interpretations? I think it could be fun. But I am aware that there are other videos that serve a similar purpose as this one. Listing basic facts from the wiki about Des definitely isn't a new idea, but I want to explore some of these findings more and making interpretations of them so that we can better understand who Des really was, not just knowing some of the events of her life. I think understanding Des's actual personality will help me in theory crafting for the second part of this video, so I may ramble a bit on that particular element in this one, but I'll try to contain myself until the actual theory. So as one final wrap up before we get into the actual information, this first video will be a basic overview on Des to introduce her, get an understanding as to what she may have been like, introduce elements to my theory, and if nothing else, be an easy guide for new players who want to know more about the mystery deer. And the second part will be a much longer video taking all the information we have, adding some that may not be directly related to Des, making connections, and filling in the blanks with some of my own ideas to get a good timeline of Des's life and what may happen in the future with her, as I think she will be an integral element of this game moving forward. I would love to have everything neatly packed into one video, but I honestly don't think I could get it out in a reasonable time, and I already had the delay twice, so I thought splitting up into two parts would make the workload easier. This week, you get the introduction, and hopefully next week, you get the theory dump. So, who even is this girl that I'm talking about? Well, December, otherwise known as Des, who I will be using both names interchangeably throughout both videos, is the sister of Noelle Holiday, which retroactively makes her the daughter of Rudy Holiday and Carol Holiday, which in turn also makes her a Holiday. Obviously. She's referenced periodically in every chapter, and in chapter 4, we even get a peek into her life by exploring her own bedroom in the Holiday Manor, but we never actually see her in-game. Kind of. And it's heavily implied that Des simply vanished at one point, or may even be dead. It's not clarified, as far as I'm aware. There are remnants of her in the world, but we're never given a straight-up answer as to what happened to her and where she could be now. All we have are breadcrumbs. So in this theory, I want to come up with a definitive answer to 5 very important questions that I believe are going to be essential for the game in the future. Who was Des? What happened to her? What's going on with her now? What will happen to her? And how do we find her? Yes, it is a lot to unpack, but that's why I'm splitting this up. But to answer any questions about her, we need to start from the beginning. The first mention of Des ever in Deltarune is an angel doll next to the sink in Rudy's hospital room. Rudy explains that she and Noelle made it during youth group when they were younger, and how Azrael and Chris tried to do the same but got distracted by making huge wings. This by itself can set up an idea that Des may or may not have been somewhat religious as a kid, as youth groups are often sponsored or formed by religious institutions such as churches. However, it could also be interpreted as Des not being very religious but participated in either appeasing her mother or Noelle, who does participate in church even to this day. Des does deeply care about Noelle, if some of the later talking points are anything to consider, so that is a very likely possibility as well, and also probably an interpretation that I'll be running with for the rest of the series. After going to Rudy's hospital room in chapter 1, Noelle will leave and then appear at the gate leading to her house. If you talk to her about Susie and tell her that she eats chalk, she mentions a story in which Chris told Noelle that ICE, the mascot of ICE's Pizza, which could be seen as a sort of cryptid creature thing that I do not have time to get into, was real and eats children, most likely to freak her out. Des would then hit Chris with a wiffle bat until they stopped lying. This clearly shows that Des cares a lot about Noelle, but I think it's still obvious that she didn't dislike Chris. More so a love tap against the trouble-causing kid rather than out of anger, though of course that is just another interpretation. In Chapter 2, if you fail to hit Noelle with the mice in Annoying Mouse Room 3, she gets upset and says that Chris is lucky that Des isn't there, or it would have been Chris falling down at the mice. Again, another obvious reference to Des trying to protect Noelle from Chris's antics. After Queen's car blows up, Noelle and Chris walk along a room that spells out December upon pressing each button while she talks about the city and a story between Chris, Noelle, Azriel, and Des. She said that Des promised that she would take Noelle to a city with shining lights before trailing off to a memory of the four exploring the forest behind the graveyard. Noelle says that they never found anything back there, but she was terrified, and Des would use Azriel's jacket to wipe away her tears. Not only does this further cement the relationship between Noelle and Des, but also between her and Azriel. The two were close enough to be in the same group, but also to be allowed to share articles of clothing to comfort her sister. While in real life it may be a simple gesture, I think it's used here to reinforce the dynamic between Des and Azriel that I will touch on later. In Queen's Mansion, when you complete the 3 puzzles just outside of the personalized rooms, Birdley describes the spelling bee between him and Noelle, and how she was doing fine until she choked up at the word December, which by the way is a crazy word to add to a spelling bee with the kid that has a sister of the exact same name who just disappeared recently. She was younger at the time, if the sprites are anything to go off of, so maybe whatever incident happened to Des was sooner and she couldn't handle the emotional stress it caused her, and as a result couldn't spell the word. If you don't perform Lesbian Skip, the game will cut to Noelle's room in Queen's Mansion, where she says she wishes that Des could see the world she's in, and later she remarks about the time she would stay up late watching horror movies with Des, and how she has fond memories of those days. This makes it pretty clear that she misses her sister a lot, but because of her recent circumstances, she can't see her. If you inspect Noelle's room later, you can find a calendar where each day is the 25th of December, which is Christmas, a December holiday. And based on the function of the rooms made for Lightners being based on their search history, it puts into perspective how often Noelle was looking up Des's full name, which appeared as a calendar, but of course only results relating to Christmas would show up, and not the actual person. Which brings up the theory that some people believe Des is also away at college, but in Chris's room, they're looking up summer schedules for college, while Noelle is directly looking up the person instead. Would she not also be looking up the summer break for college if her sister were away as well? She's smart enough to do something like that. It just doesn't make sense to me, which leads me to believe that Des is missing and not just at college. If you inspect the Angel doll in Chapter 2, Susie is curious as to why Rudy has it. He tells her that Noelle and Des made it, and Susie focuses on Des but doesn't press any further questions. This tells us that Susie is aware of who Des is, but either isn't interested or is too uncomfortable to learn more. Potentially the topic of Des outside the Holiday family is a touchy subject that not many people try to mention, because both Rudy and Noelle can bring up the topic of Des, and for the most part don't seem too bothered by the idea, maybe from the passage of time wearing down mental wounds or something else. I'm not sure yet, but I'll probably return to this in the theory video. In Chapter 3, on the physical challenge for the second board, you play Lightners Live, a basic rhythm minigame. Before, Tenna sets up the experience by asking Chris if they remember December, whom he describes as a musical prodigy, and how she would switch a cartoon channel over to music videos that Chris's mom didn't want them to see, singing along and playing the guitar to the songs. He makes a joke about attempting to get her to come back and watch TV before awkwardly pausing and moving on. This cements another theme with Des, and that's music. How she would play the guitar and sing along, but she was also a little rebellious, going against Toriel's wishes so much that later in the chapter, the door leading to the fountain is blocked by a code of 1225, which in a date format reads December Holiday to forbid music videos. The song used in Lightners Live also seems to be written by her as well, which I will be talking a lot about in my theory video. The lyrics to the song are incredibly interesting to me and tie into my overall idea of who, or what Des is at this point. People have already made videos analyzing the song through the lens of music theory, narrative purpose, and thematic purpose, but I want to look at it from the perspective of my theory, as I think a lot of the song takes on a new meaning when some of my ideas are placed in context. I doubt Toby Fox would put a generic rock song with lyrics only for the sake of a gag, so I do consider it a valid resource to build my theory around. But to get back on track, if my memory serves me right, the last obvious Des allusion in chapter 3 is the ball machine in the green room. At any point in the chapter, if you put 1225 into the slot, the screen goes blue, the music abruptly cuts off, and you can enter the ball machine. A music track called findher.ogg plays, which we will return to, as you traverse through a maze that will eventually lead to this blue ball machine. If you use it, a capsule comes out with something triangle shaped, but when you try to take it, it slips through your hand, and when you look again, you can't find your hand. This triangle, I think, and most others do, is a guitar pick, with the 1225 returning again and the song being a guitar rendition of Lost Girl, and literally being called findher.ogg. It seems like it's very obviously trying to point in the direction of Des. When it comes to interpreting the hand stuff, honestly, I don't think I will. At least not for this theory, only because as far as I'm concerned, it's not exactly relevant to any of my ideas and seems more in line with whatever the hell is going on in Chris's world, and whether or not it foreshadows Chris literally being amputated. I might take a look at it in a separate video, but anyway, I mentioned how that was the last mention of Des in chapter 3, however, I wasn't being entirely honest with you. Everybody, let me introduce you to the Knight. Okay, now look, I know Des isn't confirmed to be the Knight, I'm aware of that. However, with the overwhelming amount of evidence that she is, this theory runs with that idea. If you don't believe it, that's fine, but for the sake of my own personal beliefs, and to make this theory make any sense, Des will be used as the Knight. I'll quickly give a bit of evidence to back this up, but I won't go too far into it because there are several videos already out there that do a much better job than I could. The Knight has antlers. They appear to be left-handed, which Des appears to be as well with Computer Mouse in chapter 4. Their weapon looks similar to a wiffle bat, which Des has used before. The Knight heads into the bunker at the end of the chapter, which Des has a code to, which just so happened to be the numbers of a December holiday. Lost Girl is kinda in Black Knife. Carol clearly has an interest in Chris's soul and knows some of the power of it, so is probably interested in its ability to seal fountains, which in that case, wouldn't it be against their character to work with Chris if she was the Knight and actively trying to bring the roaring while they have the ability to actively stop it? Rudy is not the fucking Knight. Carol does not have the teenager aura that the Knight has. Like, no way this old lady is pulling this shit. The place we fight the Knight is literally full of snow, as it would in December. Just because the answer is obvious doesn't make it wrong, or that Toby would change the story to throw fans off. This isn't fucking Five Nights at Freddy's. Anyway, if you don't believe in Death Knight, whatever, your choice, it doesn't affect me. And if Death doesn't end up being the Knight, okay. As long as the story is good, I don't care. But as I said, for the sake of this theory, we will be continuing under this assumption. Man, I got so caught up in the Knight stuff, I forgot to mention Des appears in Tenna's flashback right before the Knight fight. She's the first to disappear, a clear indication that her disappearance led to the complicated relations between the holidays and dreamers that seem to plague the entire game. But moving on to chapter 4, we're able to explore the holiday manor, but are stopped when attempting to enter Des's room. However, when Noelle isn't following us anymore, we get full access to it. It has an unplugged monitor with the mouse to the left, holiday-themed games and movies along with scary games, a bed with all sorts of items under it, like army rations, guitar picks, paintball gear, ice skates, and a drawing, band posters on the closet, a CD player with punk rock CDs and a ska CD, a box with burnt lighters, multi-tool knives, expired rations, walkie-talkies, binoculars, shoes, comic books, paintballs, a cracked hockey mask, yarn, buttons, Azrael's container, and you can come to your own conclusion about this one. There's also a violin, flute, and microphone in a pile, along with rollerblades and a wiffle bat. But in the middle of the room is a red guitar, which has a shelter code taped inside of it. Attempting to read it runs off the numbers 1, 2, 2. but is cut off too soon by Chris removing their own soul. Later, you can re-enter the room as the soul before getting caught by Chris. Susie abruptly sits on the side of Dessa's bed, scaring Noelle. Then, the inside of the closet is available for us to see. Plenty of large hearts, some of her clothing, including a sweater that looks very similar to something Azriel would wear, roller skates, a trumpet, a drum set, lots of shoes, and hockey sticks. Now, looking at the significance this has for building Dessa's characters, there is a lot to unpack here. And without getting too deep into it, since I want to save that for the theory video, I'll quickly run through some of the additions we can make. From the mouse's position, she is most likely left-handed. She clearly has an interest in gaming and in horror, but showed restraint when showing them around the kids. The army rations could mean a lot of things, but I won't get too deep into it now since my thoughts on it are purely speculation. But we'll leave it as she was an adventurous kid, but definitely had a lot of stuff to prepare with. All the music equipment reinforces her love for playing instruments. Her ice skates, paintball gear, hockey sticks, wiffle bats, etc. introduces the idea of her being into sports. She seems to particularly like hockey, considering her hockey mask as well. Her drawing from Azriel's book, his retainer, the ska CD, and his sweater all seem to share the idea that he and Des were very close, and maybe in a romantic relationship, but that's not confirmed. A good chunk of her items in her box seem to reinforce the idea of her being an explorer, along with the yarn and buttons, potentially hitting at her enjoying crafts as well. Then her guitar being separated from the rest of the objects and having a shelter code inside clearly hints the idea of it being an important instrument to her, and her knowing something about the shelter, and an extension Dark Worlds. There is also a very high likelihood that Carol is preserving her room to be exactly how it was before Des disappeared, as Noelle is afraid to even touch the bed and Carol is furious with Susie for holding Dessa's guitar, but there really isn't much else to add to that right now. And that just about covers the information in-game about Des, at least as far as I can remember. Except I didn't remember correctly. There are actually a few things I missed while writing the script. You see, I've tried very hard to be as thorough as possible in my analysis of this game to find every piece of information on Des, whether it was necessarily helpful or not, but I did forget about 3 instances that heavily hint at Des or outright mention her signature number. I'll be making my first 2 amendments in this video and save the second amendment for the next section. The first one is very small, but in chapter 2, if you unequip Noelle's silver watch, it'll be one of the few items that will transfer as a unique item to the light world, as simply a wristwatch. Checking the info on it will give the flavor text, maybe an expensive antique, stuck before noon. The noon is the interesting part to me, because if you know anything about clocks, noon is 12:30, or more likely, what it's intended to be interpreted as 12:25. This could be read as Des literally haunting the narrative, leaving Noelle's watch stuck at that time to let her know of their presence, or what I think it could be, Noelle intentionally breaking the clock at the time as a reminder of her sister, a way to never forget. Don't forget. And the second instance I missed was something I came across while editing this video. I saw this post a while back, but it completely slipped my mind while writing, until it came up in my feed again. At Daily Toby Fox Trivia on Twitter states, after the final prophecy in chapter 4, if you try and go back, there is some extra dialogue preventing you from leaving, and in the code is a guitar sound that is muted normally, but by changing the code, you can hear it in-game. This by itself is incredibly fascinating, but in addition, one of the commenters at Sir_Crow_ states, fun fact, the game tracks that you did this. What the fuck does this mean? This is such a small detail and can hit at 1,000 different things that I can't even begin to describe. I'll look at this more in my theory video, but the idea that Des is preventing you from backtracking is just so insane to me. This is such a methodical way of preventing backtracking, and the guitar sound throws me off in a million different directions. And the fact that the game tracks that you did this? Toby, what are you planning? What the fuck were you dreaming? Okay, sorry. I just felt like it was important to add these 2 pieces of information to our pile. Let's get back to the original script. Unfortunately, we don't have a massive amount of details given from the character yet to be 100% conclusive on who she was or what happened to her, but enough to get the wheels turning for a potential theory. I mean, I've worked with less when trying to predict what could happen, so I don't doubt I can come up with some ideas. It kinda sucks though. I wish we had more information on her from other sources that I could use. It'd make my job a little easier. Oh, that might just do it. Now, because of the nature of the Spamton sweepstakes and anything else we'll be taking a look at, this section may start to feel a bit all over the place, so I ask that you please bear with me for the next few minutes. When I inevitably miss the smallest piece of information that changes how we perceive death in its entirety, don't kill me, please. And also, I'll be covering any other outside sources that could be referring to death, whether that's the alarm clock dialogue, Noelle's poem, or unused, which I will clarify when we get there. But for now, let's blast through some of the Spamton sweepstakes, shall we? If you go to deltarune.com/ICE, it shows a supposed website of ICE sightings that a young Noelle wrote an entry for. It explains that she believed that a pizza box was haunted and how only Des believed her. Later, they would burn the box to quote-unquote kill it, and Des would hit Chris after they tried to scare Noelle with the pizza box. I think, to me, this shows how far Des was willing to go to have a good relationship with Noelle. Do I think Des actually believed Noelle when she said the box winked at her? No, but sometimes older siblings will indulge in what their younger sibling has to say to not invalidate them, especially if the kid might have thought they saw something but didn't actually. It doesn't automatically have to be a malicious or manipulative pursuit. Though, of course, there is a chance that Des does believe there's something going on with ICE. Their presence is strange, so that anything could be possible, really. Something interesting, however, is that if you look at the bottom of the page, it says, for those that enjoyed these sightings, be sure to take a look at the ones from her sister, with the word sister being highlighted. If you press it, it redirects you to deltarune.com/December, which is just the 404 page. But interestingly, on deltarune.com, if you put an invalid URL, it just sends you to the dog check room. So this 404 page is clearly intentional. It asks you to check your spelling on the URL, and if you go up and change it from deltarune.com/December to deltarune.com/Des, this appears. The page states it's a red guitar, and as promised, the screen shows Des's red guitar found in Chapter 4. And if you press the guitar, it plays findher.ogg. Now, there really isn't too much to unpack here because all of this information has been used in-game, but I will say the name of the track makes it very clear that learning what happened to Des will be a very important part of the narrative. And I think it being a guitar rendition of Lost Girl is very interesting, because that would potentially insinuate that Lost Girl might be a holiday motif, but we know that isn't true from both Susie and Rouse using it. I do have a potential explanation for this, but we'll come back to it in part 2. And the last Spamton sweepstakes related thing to Des is probably in the Q&A. Dorked, who makes very cool videos and comics, asked if Spamton knew anything about Des, and he says that Noelle, who is the Hochi Mama, I don't fucking know, just go along with it, would respond to his spam emails about a free friend finder in hopes of looking for Des. He says he couldn't find anything, but also adds that he would also like to know information about her. We know Spamton has some sort of fondness for Noelle because she was the only one to ever check her spam email, so maybe that's the only reason? Or maybe he's also interested in the mystery of Des. It's hard to say, but again, it just goes to show the lengths that Noelle went to find her sister, even to the point of responding to sketchy spam emails in hopes of finding anything. And that's pretty much it when it comes to the Spamton sweepstakes. Hi, I'm back again. This is the second amendment to the video. It's really short, I promise. I won't keep you too long. Something that somehow completely went over my head when looking back at the Spamton sweepstakes is in relation to the Holiday Girl 1225 blog posts. And it isn't about the contents of the posts. It's about the name of the blog and the username posting them. Holiday Girl 1225. 1225. Christmas. December holiday. I completely overlooked this until editing, and I really have no clue how. It was right there in front of my face, and I blinked and acted like everything was normal. To me, this reinforces the idea I had earlier that Noelle is changing certain aspects of her life to never forget this, such as sticking her watch at 12:25 and naming her online profile Holiday Girl 1225. It's her way of remembering someone she lost, especially since Noelle has the tendency to forget things. Yes, this will be important for part 2, but outside of that, that's all I have to say. We can go back to the present script for the rest of the video now. Enjoy. There isn't a lot of information, and certainly not much that adds a whole lot of depth to her character, but it's something at least. However, we aren't quite done yet, as there are a few more resources that we can look at to acquire information on her. First of all, in the Undertale alarm clock dialogue, Asgore mentions that both Des and Noelle will be able to grow up in the sunlight since the barrier was broken, and Sans mentions both of them in a story he tells in the Xbox version of Undertale as well. This doesn't add much, but it does confirm the existence of both of them in that world, and how Sans refers to the two implies that Des might not have antlers, but Tennis Flashback seems to disprove that idea. Next, Toby Fox released a newsletter for the holidays in 2024, and at the end of it, you can click on this little guy and read a poem written by Noelle. It details memories she had of making snow angels with the group and how hers was always the smallest, but Des would push away the snow and give her the biggest wings out of everyone. And she adds how she wishes it could snow whenever she wanted. Interestingly, Des refers to Noelle as Ellie, clearly indicating the relationship they have. There's actually a lot of references to show the close relationship Des and Noelle have and remembering the past, which I will touch on in part 2 a lot because I think it is incredibly important. But until then, it's another great reminder of how close these two were together whenever Des was around. And now, I guess I have to talk about it. The unused text files. It's not that I didn't want to go over it at some point, I just tried delaying it as long as possible because it's kind of hard to know what to make of them. You can interpret it in a million different ways, and all of those interpretations would have some merit to them. It's just that vague. So for now, I'll just be overviewing them and giving my own brief interpretations, and save the big stuff for later. Each chapter has a unique set, so let's get started. The first unused has someone calling out for help in an area that is incredibly dark. They have no clue where they are and are begging for someone to say something. In chapter 2, it updates to them accepting that no one can hear them, but stating how the only thing that interrupts the silence is a noise that sounds like scratching. In chapter 3, they note that they've asked about where they are a billion times, and describe a nightmare that sounds eerily similar to the storage closet in chapter 1, walking into darkness, light shining from the doorway, and the door slamming behind them before it all goes dark. They end it by questioning the reality of the world they used to live in, wondering if that was just a dream and their current circumstances are the actual reality. In chapter 4, it changes to them losing track of time completely. They reminisce about simple activities that made time meaningful to them, activities that we would all take for granted, like TV and breakfast. They describe how they don't eat or drink anymore and other oddities about themselves that kind of describe the feeling of limbo. It's still silent outside of the scratching, which they find to be almost comforting, as if someone is actively listening to them. And that's a basic introduction to the unused strings. Now, by the fact that I'm bringing this up, you can already tell the direction I'm going with this. I think the person in the unused strings is December Holiday. I know, obvious choice, but it's obvious for a reason. A character that mysteriously disappeared from hometown, and a character that is mysteriously stuck in the code, it just seems a bit too convenient for me not to use. I think this is Des, or at least the consciousness of Des. Maybe not the current physical form, but that I will save for another time. I'll sound absolutely crazy if I start ranting about the voice in the code being Des's voice and the physical form of Des being as close to a goner as we're gonna get, but again, that's for another day. And with that, I have one more thing I want to go over, actually. Something that I discovered recently and found out that other people knew about. Let me introduce you to a Twitter account named @DesHoliday. What the fuck is this? A blank Twitter account with a white profile picture made back in September of 2015, and I'm noticing some patterns here, that's private and isn't following anybody, or followed by anybody. It's clear that Toby prepares far in advance for his projects, so it could be another one of his accounts, though there is some evidence to suggest that it was a random stranger who changed the name back in 2023, but the accounts linked to that idea are also very strange. It's hard to say anything yet really, but if it ends up being real, the idea of Des being a very important character in this game is practically confirmed at this point. Nope, secret character bullshit. They are essential to the story. Of course, that's running with the idea that this is official and not just some random fan who wanted to troll the community. That's also very possible. But that doesn't change the fact that Des is becoming more and more prominent in the story. And also, even if it isn't official, just let me have my fun, goddammit. And that just about covers everything I have for part 1. Going over each chapter and reading into everything related to December, and looking at outside sources to pick apart all the pieces so we can put them together and make a concrete theory. Nowhere near did I expect this video to reach over 30 minutes of runtime. I honestly expected a 15 or so minute video at best, but when it comes to a topic as interesting as this one, I just can't help myself but rant at least a little. Which does worry me for part 2, because at the time of writing this, I haven't even started writing the script for that one, and I know I have a lot more to say, and I know I'll already have to delay this video a second time, and I highly doubt I can get the second part out by next week, but I'll try to shoot for the week after. I don't want to make you guys wait too long, but knowing how slow my work ethic is sometimes, I can't make any promises. I just want the payoff to be good, whether or not you agree with the conclusions I make. Thank you all so much for watching and sticking around with my channel. If you enjoyed the video, subscribing would mean a lot. A like and a comment would also be greatly appreciated. I'm very interested to hear some of your guys' thoughts and if I got anything wrong. I'll make any corrections or give some opinions on some of your guys' thoughts in part 2 when that comes around, so stay tuned for that. Bye bye for now.